Hey, this is Zach with Zach and Jody, and today we are doing a Nashville portrait session using some Westcott gear. We're using the Westcott Rapid Box 26-inch, and we're also using two Westcott strip banks, the Rapid Boxes as well, so check it out. So we're here in this cool location here at the factory in Franklin, Tennessee, not too far from Nashville, where my wife and I live. And this is a really cool background. I love the corrugated metal. It looks cool, but unfortunately the lighting here is not the best. The reason for that is we have this long overhang and we're too far underneath it, so it's kind of causing a lot of shadows to shoot down our eyes. But down below we do have some light coming up, kicking into our face, but it's really kind of scary movie lighting. There's too much light coming from underneath, and you can see this hot spot on the ground that's kicking the light up. So the light is honestly kind of flat, boring, not very exciting. So using these modifiers, we're going to try to get light in the right places and make it look much more interesting and honestly look a little bit more like a studio setup, even though we're outside on location. So here we are in the little breezeway, and we're going to kind of dissect the lighting so you know exactly what we're doing. My goal for this shot, and I like to think about what I'm doing before I get into that situation. I look at the shot and go, what's going to make this look the best? With this corrugated cool metal wall and this concrete floor, I think this looks more like a studio setup, and I want it to look a lot less like a natural ambient shot with kind of organic looking light. So we're using the Westcott 26-inch as our main light, the Rapid Box. This is going to be in real close, so it's going to create a lot of light just right here on Ellie, our amazing subject today. And it's going to have a lot of light fall off down here, so I'm going to avoid shooting down there because I don't want it to look too dark down in this part. What I'm also doing is I've got the main light powered up 2 stops or 3 times brighter than the ambient light, because I want the ambient light to be just real subtle, if anything at all, because that's going to help it look more controlled and more dramatic and dynamic looking versus more natural looking. The background lights are exactly 1.5 stops under the power of the main light. That's kind of a good ratio to use if you're using background lights, or even if it's the sun and you don't want the background to look blown out when it's hitting your subject. If they're the same power, the background lights, when they reflect back into the lens, tend to get exaggerated as to how bright they are. So if you ever do this, say your main light is f4 and your background light's f4, you'll notice that it'll look like their skin is completely blown out from the background light. So that's why we underpower them somewhere between 1 and 2 stops to give us that nice, correctly exposed, subtle looking background light. So that's really the light setup. The main light is feathered off to the side at about a 45-degree angle, and then actually have the light turned this way a little bit because it's going to make the light a little softer on this side of her face when you what's called feathering the light. The background lights are the 2 strip banks from Westcott, and they're just set up at 45-degree angles to Ellie's back. So they're coming in kind of organically like the sun would. The sun could be 45 degrees over your shoulder, but in this case we have 2 suns, so it's going to look a little more studio lit, a little more dramatic, and a little more fashiony looking because of those 2 light sources. And that's what we're doing. So here we go. As I'm shooting, I'm always watching my histogram, because my histogram is going to tell me if my exposure changed. You know, it's really bright out here and you probably can't see. I can barely see my screen. But what I can see is my histogram really clearly. And I'm specifically watching my red channel, because the red channel always has those skin tones in it. Other things can be in the red channel, things in the background, and other things that could make it look brighter. But once I get my exposure set with, I use a light meter, the handheld incident light meter. Once I use that and I take my first image, I check that histogram against that. And now as I'm shooting, I'm constantly watching that. So if the ambient light changes or if my flash stops working, my main light, and I don't notice it, I'm going to see it real quick on that histogram and know, hey, something's wrong here. Check the settings or make sure we got good enough batteries or whatever. And in this case, my red channel is nice and brightly exposed, but it's not overexposed, which I know is her skin tone, and we're in good shape. So I'm going into more of a short lighting situation, so I'm going to have Ellie turn her shoulder towards me, just a hair, and then looking over her shoulder. And now we're doing kind of a short lit shot, which is going to be just a little more dramatic. And because we're not letting a lot of the ambient light come in, the shadow side of her face, as you can see, is going to be much more dark, a little more edgy looking. I can slow my shutter speed down if I want to. I'll do that right now. and I can get some of that ambient light in the shot so it's less dramatic. But I actually really prefer, for my style for today, going more of this edgy, dark, contrasty kind of look. So we're going to switch up the lighting here. We're going to do what I kind of call a tabletop lighting. I'm going to have my amazing wife, Jody, help me out here. We're going to hold the light. And this is hard to do without a boom stand, and normally you wouldn't, but because this is so light, because it's just a 5/8, it weighs next to nothing, we can sort of hold the light in this angle. And normally if you're going to do a glamour lit shot, which is a straight on image, you would kind of shoot the light this way. But the problem with that is, one, the light hits the background, and I don't want it to hit the background, and two, even though this is a very soft light, we can soften it more by feathering the light towards the ground and just letting the edge of that light just hit the front of her face, and it's going to make for a very soft, subtle photo. It's going to look really, really cool. The cool thing about this box, and I had the diffusion panel on it just a second ago, just covering the front. I've got the deflector dish on the inside. What's cool about this is it creates that dead spot in the center, and then the light wraps around the outside. And when the diffusion is on the front, it's just going to create a very soft, even light that you saw. Great for shooting women. You know, the softer the light on women, the better. But for Elisha, I want a little more rock star, edgy, specular. So if I take that out, we're going to get some of this reflection off of the silver interior, and the light will get a little more contrasty, but in a good way. It's not going to look harsh, but it's going to look a little bit more aggressive. And this is more of a kind of a beauty dish effect when we do this. A silver beauty dish will have the same exact effect. I want to technically sort of split light in this shot, so the light is 90 degrees to one side, which is going to light one side of his face, not light the other, and it's pointing straight that way. One of the reasons it's pointing straight that way is I don't want to split light them. The other reason is so it doesn't hit the background, because when I take that diffusion off the front, it shoots at the background at a much harsher angle, and it's kind of casting a nasty shadow in the background, which we don't want. So we're trying to avoid that with this image right here, and I think we've accomplished that by just feathering it off far enough, and hopefully it looks aggressive but not overly aggressive. So here we go. We just finished this setup. Everything turned out really, really good. Again, the thing that I love about walking into, a shaded situation like this that has some okay lighting in it is we can bust out a speed light, a very lightweight modifier, the Rapid Box 26-inch. The quality of the light coming out of it is spectacular, and we can create something really dramatic and dynamic out of something that really wasn't that dramatic and dynamic. So again, setup turned out really good, and thanks for tuning in.